Yeah, it's funny how now the third time under Kirby Smart that Georgia's facing Notre Dame, like somehow the stakes have just kind of gradually increased each time these teams have met. But the first thing I'll ask you is how are you feeling about the 8:45 kickoff?
I think that's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. There's no reason to have the games. Like, why start the game at 1, 5, and 8:45? It's just absolutely ridiculous for a. But I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. But it just like, because I mean, if you have kids, you have young kids. I mean, gosh, kickoff won't be till about 9 o'clock. You know the way these things go, and then you got a million commercials. The games are getting over midnight after midnight. So, that's pretty ridiculous. But hey, look, you get this opportunity to play on the stage. You welcome it no matter what time the kickoff is. But I'd rather be doing that than playing at 1. I mean, I do kind of like the idea that it is the prime time game. It is the big game. It is, I believe, the biggest game of the quarterfinals, simply because it is more of a unique game than Ohio State and Oregon, because we've already seen that game get played this season. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
No, that's fair. I think it's probably the one that people are giving the lower seed the best shot to win. Although I guess I take that
actually
back.
Ohio
Penn
State's
State and Texas are the too. We might all get the lower seeds in all these games, since Texas and Penn State are technically the lower seed. So disregard that.
Yeah, Texas is a lower seed. Yeah, that's right. And they're I think a 2-touchdown favorite as well. So it'll be of the two. I mean, I actually think that there's a contingent of people that think Notre Dame's going to win this game. There's some that don't. I think it's about the same between Ohio State and Oregon. You know, we'll see it. I just hope they're good games. That's the big thing for me.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we get some better games than we got this past weekend. Like, what do you think is like the overall confidence level of Notre Dame's fans coming into this one right now?
It's a very confident football team. I mean, you look at where these two teams were. You talked about the 2017 matchup and the 2019 matchup. Those programs are very different places than they are now. Georgia obviously has taken another big jump since then, winning 2 titles. And Notre Dame is a much different team now than they were back then. You know, a more talented team top to bottom than they were back then. Is that going to be enough to make another deep run and beat a team like Georgia and kind of climb over that mountain that they haven't been able to climb, beating a Georgia, Bama, Ohio State type program, which they haven't been able to do in the last, 15 years or so. And that's something that we're going to find out. But, this is I think the confidence level is Notre Dame fans believe, even with all the injuries that they've had, that this is still a team that gives them their best chance to win a game like this, as opposed to in the past where, in 2012 against Bama, you needed a bunch of breaks to go your way to have a chance to win that football game. When you look at playing Bama in 2020 and you're talking about one of the corners that started for Notre Dame that game has transferred out because he was all the way down to like third string. He'd gotten beaten out by just better players, and the roster's a whole lot different now. And so I think that's part of where that confidence comes from is seeing that. And then watching this Notre Dame team the last couple of years win some big games, which they really haven't done a whole lot of, beating Clemson by 21 a couple of years ago, going down on the road and beating Texas A&M. And of course, this is a team that's won 11 straight games. And so I think there's just a lot of confidence. And Notre Dame hasn't really played a lot of close games this year. Closest game they really played was a 7-point win over Louisville, where they led for over 52 minutes of the game. And then, of course, the USC game was somewhat close, but Notre Dame never only team that USC led in the fourth quarter of every game they played this year. They never led at all against Notre Dame. So I think that's where a lot of the confidence comes from Notre Dame fans. But Notre Dame fans also respect the heck out of Georgia and understand, what a win like this would mean for the program. So I think there's a lot of optimism and excitement about that too, is can you get over the hump? That's the big thing for Notre Dame. Can you beat a program like that? Can you beat one of the elite programs, one of the tier 1 programs? And they haven't been able to really do that with any kind of consistency the last 15 years. Because, let's be honest, the 2 Clemson teams they beat, those weren't you had in 2020, you beat them without Trevor Lawrence because he had COVID, right? In 2022, that was a good Clemson team, but it wasn't a great Clemson team. It was a 10-3, lost to Tennessee.
Before you go on, that's the game where I saw DJ Uiagalelei play, and I was like, I've never seen that guy play again. I've never seen that guy play again. I thought he was going to be a superstar.
Nope. That's the best he ever did. Was the second career start. It was the best game he ever had in his life. Yeah.
But I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. I was just saying, like, those Clemson teams were not like we saw Notre Dame play Clemson later that year with Trevor, and they got smashed.
Yeah.
You know, so like this is that mountain that Notre Dame has to climb is can you beat one of those tier 1 legitimate championship caliber programs, not a championship caliber program from past years that's not that anymore like Clemson was, but a team that is in their prime, so to speak. And they almost did it against Ohio State last year. They almost did it against Georgia in 2019, but almost doesn't do anything, right? The Brian Kelly era of telling people, well, we didn't lose to Bama as bad as so-and-so team did. That stuff's over with now. It's like now it's time to start winning those football games.
Yeah, and I mean that Georgia, let's hope Georgia's not another example of one of those that's not at that elite level that they were at 2021 and 2022. Hopefully it was just a temporary thing and they're getting back there from a Georgia perspective. But and also, yeah, the 2012 and 2020 Bama, if you have to rank those Nick Saban teams, those might literally be the two best.
2012 was certainly up there, and 2020.
Yeah, that 2020 team was just, you could have had 3 different guys win the Heisman Trophy. Like, baby, like, I don't know. You could have convinced
2020 is such a weird year because you don't really know how good teams really were that year because of COVID and because of all the nonsense. You couldn't play out of league. It just, like, is it a surprise that the only year? Yeah, just the only year A&M was good was the COVID year. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you just look at all those things. It's just, I've kind of blocked that whole year out. It just was such a weird year. But that 2012 Bama team was pretty excellent. And, you know, and again, like I said, Georgia and Notre Dame played 2 very competitive games in 17 and 19. And, you know, Notre Dame had chances to win each game. They had the ball with less than 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter with a chance to win the game in both games and couldn't get it done. And now it's, you know, for Notre Dame, it's about can you make those plays in those clutch moments to get it done? Jake Fromm did. You know, Brandon Wimbush couldn't in 2017, and then Jake Fromm did, and Ian Book couldn't in 2019. And that's what's going to come down to. Is Riley Leonard different, or is this just more of the same?
Yeah. And so what would you say is the team? Because I think most people, I for one, I was jumping on the Notre Dame bandwagon after that first week win, that week 1 win over Texas A&M. Just the way they did it was just so gritty, and kind of we see this 3-headed monster in the backfield. Like, and obviously Riley Leonard's continued to be kind of a low-key workhorse, him and Jeremiah Love in the running game. But what do you think is the game that kind of most like closely represents like a team that compares to Georgia in terms of who Notre Dame's played this year?
Well, I don't know that they've played a team like Georgia, to be honest with you. I don't know that I could look at it. You could say, okay, well, this team has a defensive line similar to Georgia, and this team has a run game similar to Georgia, or a pass receiver similar to Georgia. I don't know that there's been any team that's kind of had that whole package, which is why Georgia is where they are. I mean, defensively, I'd say A&M's probably the closest from a front 4 type of standpoint. And a linebacker type of standpoint. I think Georgia's offensive line, and there's some similarities between their offensive line and A&M's, although I'd say A&M runs the ball a lot better than Georgia did this year. We'll see if that changes with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback, who brings a little bit of a different running element to the table than I think that we saw from Carson Beck, who's a good athlete, but he's more of a scrambler. I mean, anybody that's watched Gunnar Stockton's high school film knows that kid can legitimately run the football in ways that you see from, you know, people like Riley Leonard and Jalen Milroe. Not that he's the kind of athlete, but just as far as you can do some things with him as a designed runner, read zones, quarterback power, things like that. But receiving cores, the one thing they have faced is they've faced some very good receiving cores this year. Obviously, Louisville had a very good receiving core. USC had a very good receiving core, and Indiana pretty good receiving core. But it's going to be different. They haven't faced anything like what Georgia has size and power wise on defense since really that opener against A&M.
Yeah, A&M was kind of the team I was trying to think of, because the other aspect is I don't know what to expect for Georgia's offense. I mean, does Carson Beck being out, does that give you more confidence in Notre Dame getting a win?
No, it's kind of funny. Well, number one, Notre Dame's going to be playing without, you know, their star defensive tackle who got hurt against Indiana. He's out for the rest of the year. And Riley Mills, they lost their All-American cornerback Benjamin Morrison midway through the season. So, you know, Notre Dame's been playing great defense all but one game this year, but the USC game. But they're a beat up group. But I actually kind of felt, I said this on our show after the the SEC title game. I said this is what Georgia should have been doing all year. Like what they did in the second half against Texas is what they should have been doing all year. You got a big physical offensive line. You don't have great receivers. You've got some athletes at receiver, but you don't have great receivers. You don't have Brock Bowers. You don't have Lad McConkey. You don't have I'm trying to remember the name of the kid that they had that went to Texas. I always forget his name.
A.D. Mitchell.
A.D. Mitchell, right? You don't have that kind of player. Dylan Bell's a good player, but he's been banged up a lot. Arian Smith is fast, but he's more of a track guy than he is an actual football player in a lot of ways. You should have been a team that was building around the run game and then, having your pass game be the complement to that. And I actually think this is going to force Georgia to kind of go back to what they really should have been all year. I think they were trying to replicate what they were last year. But again, you don't have Brock Bowers. You don't have Lad McConkey and some of those guys. And I just felt they didn't lean enough into their ability to be a power running team. And you asked your big physical linemen to be pass blockers. And I don't think that's where their strengths are. I think their strengths are when they can be more geared towards running right at people. And so, but at the end of the day, both of these teams are banged up and missing great players. It's going to be about, who's able to overcome those the most.
Yeah. I always compare Arian Smith to the platoon outfielder that is forced to play every day. It's like, look, it's not this guy's fault that he's your best receiver. He's out here doing it. It's Georgia's fault that you don't have receivers better than Arian Smith. But it's like, this guy, he is what he is. He gets open more than anybody else. Unfortunately, he's just dropping a lot of those. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I kind of wonder the same. And there's so much negativity around Carson Beck this year among the Georgia fan base. And he was playing really poorly for the middle stretch of the season, but I feel like he really started to come along as the season went. And I mean, you have a team that's got a bad run game and they lead the nation in drops and they win the SEC. I think Carson Beck deserves a lot of credit for keeping that team afloat as long as they were. But like you said, I think Georgia, if there was a team that was able to change their identity and all of a sudden just become a run team, it wouldn't shock you if it was the Georgia Bulldogs with the way they recruit the running back position and the offensive line position. And they've gotten more healthy at the running back position over these last 3-4 weeks too. ETN kind of had to gut it out to play in that Texas game.
I mean, that's kind of what you need, right? I mean, you need those guys to get back on track. You've got Trevor Etienne, you've got Nate Frazier, you got Branson Robinson's out, right? He's been hurt, correct?
I don't think he's going to be back. Roderick Robinson has played a little bit, so I think he should be healthy.
But you got Nate Frazier, you got Trevor Etienne. They're grinded out type of players. You look at Gunnar Stockton, he's a thick built, like I said, a kind of a fullback type. The guy we compared him to as sort of a body type and what he was in high school is a lot like the kid that Army had at quarterback this year as a runner. Now he's obviously a better passer than that kid is, but as a runner that he built more like a fullback. So I think it's going to change how they run. And that's something Notre Dame's going to have to be prepared for look, they're not going to reinvent their offense. They're not just going to go from being like an air raid team one week to the triple option the next week. Right. But within who they are, you're going to see some adjustments and some wrinkles and some different things that they're going to try to throw at Notre Dame. And that's one of the good things that Notre Dame does have going forward. There's a lot of advantages of being an independent. One of them is you do play teams from all types of different leagues. And one week you're playing an air raid team, the next week you're playing a pro style team, the next week you're playing a triple option team. You've had to be prepared for a whole lot of different type of offenses. And I think that should help them be prepared. But but this is a really good Notre Dame defense, even with all the injuries. It's still a very young but very talented Notre Dame defense, and they're going to try to ride on that. But at the end of the day, this game is going to be determined by whether or not Notre Dame can get anything going with their offense. And Georgia's going to have a very simple goal. We're going to try to stop the run. You're going to have to beat us throwing the football. Can Notre Dame still try to run the ball effectively, which some teams have? Look, let's be honest about something. For the last 3 months, everyone has tried to stop Notre Dame's run game. No one's been able to really do it for the last couple months. Can Georgia be the difference? And if they are, can Notre Dame's quarterback and their receivers and their tight ends step up and make enough plays against what I think has been a very inconsistent Georgia secondary this season and take advantage of it? And that's because, look, one thing I've said is the secondaries in the SEC this year were not very good. And you've seen a little bit of that. I mean, you saw what happened to Texas against Clemson's secondary receivers. You saw what happened to, Tennessee against Ohio State's receivers. But Notre Dame's not built at receiver like those teams. They don't have the talent at receiver that Clemson has. They don't have the talent at receiver that Ohio State has, nor does anyone else in college football with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. But, that's what they're going to have to do is try to find some balance and make sure they can still do what they do best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you never want to lose your starting quarterback, but I think if Georgia could do it, they picked the absolute perfect time. You get not in terms of being the Texas game, but at least it was at halftime. You get an entire half to kind of prepare for this guy to be the guy.
Well, look,
you design a game plan for him.
Yeah. Let me say this before I got to run because we have a show coming up at 8:30. But let's not forget the first year of the 4-team playoff. There was a team that went into the playoff whose starting quarterback got hurt in the last game of the regular season. And then they had to go in with the backup in the Big Ten title game, won that game, beat Bama in the semifinals with their backup quarterback, and then beat Oregon in the championship game. I'm obviously talking about Ohio State, who had to put Cardell Jones in the game. And what did they do in those 3 games? We're going to rely on the run game. We're going to run the football, play great defense, and then our quarterback just has to take some shots and hit a couple throws down the field. And that's what they asked them to do. They adjusted. They changed how they went about it. And of course, they had Ezekiel Elliott at running back. That helps, right? But that's what they did. They had to not reinvent themselves, but they had to adjust who they were and what they had been doing. And they were able to do it enough to go, ride it all the way to the title. Could Georgia be that way this year? We're going to find out. But they're going to certainly have a tough test on January 1st, just like Notre Dame's going to have a tough test. It's 2 really good football teams.
Yeah, we will find out. It should be a good one. And I will be coming to you with a post-game one in the AM. So who knows when that game's actually going to end. But Brian, I appreciate you joining. How can the people find you?
Irish Breakdown. So on YouTube, whether it's podcast, whatever podcast feed you use, obviously our YouTube channel, you can go to Irish Breakdown. You can also check out all of our written content at irishbreakdown.com.
All right. Thanks so much, Brian. Enjoy your Christmas and your holiday weekend.
Same to you. Merry Christmas.
Thanks. All right. Well, that was Brian Driscoll from Irish Breakdown. You just heard talking about that Sugar Bowl matchup here in what we got, like 8 days, I want to say. Here we are on the 23rd. I don't know. Math is escaping me. This time of the year, this is 9 days away. This time of the year, the days just all start to run together. But I mean, I think you heard Brian talking about Notre Dame. I think there's a lot of reasons for Notre Dame to be confident when it comes to this matchup with Georgia. I think you saw Notre Dame, I want to say from a betting perspective, start as a 1-point favorite. And I think Georgia is now up to a 1.5-point favorite. So that one has flipped in like the first day or two since they've posted that line. So it'll definitely be an interesting game. I really do wonder how Gunnar Stockton impacts this game. Like obviously he's going to have a huge impact on this game. He's the quarterback in the game, but just in terms of how he affects everyone else in the game, because Georgia has been a subpar running team all season long. Georgia has been a team that's dropped passes all season long, and so you just wonder, maybe a different guy's throwing it. Maybe he's, I don't know, maybe he's throwing a little more catchable ball. Maybe he's lobbing it up there. It's a little softer for the guys. I don't know. You kind of saw that, I think, what was it, when Mike Vick left the Falcons? Like Matt Ryan didn't have the arm Mike Vick had, but just throwing a little more catchable passes. I'm not sure how that pertains to Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton, but I don't know. You could see something like that. Maybe guys are just having to respect the quarterback's legs so much in terms of scrambling in the pass game, that maybe he starts to get some open lanes to throw that Carson Beck wasn't getting to throw. And I think specifically in the run game, I think you're definitely going to see the running backs get some run lanes that they wouldn't have gotten if the defense is not worried about that quarterback keeping the ball himself. Like Brooks Austin, who covers Georgia football, the film guy, I believe is what he goes by. He did a great breakdown of Georgia's running game and how it changed with Gunnar Stockton running the show. So that's my biggest thing. There's a lot of people that are talking about Georgia like they're a known commodity. Like I've heard so many people just talk about Gunnar Stockton like what he is and what he isn't. It's like, this guy's never made a start in college football, and he's played one half of meaningful football. And it was against a team who a lot of people think is the best defense in college football, the Texas Longhorns. And I wouldn't really argue with them if you said, if you told me you thought Texas had the best defense in college football. They've been elite for most of the season. I kind of question the schedule that Texas has played. So, I mean, there is that, but that defense, you can tell they're dudes all over that side of the ball, whether it's the defensive line, the secondary. I would say probably the best secondary I've seen in college football this year. So Texas is a really good team. And that's who Gunnar Stockton faced. So the fact that we have a half of football and a couple plays in overtime before Stockton took that big hit and knocked him out, you saw Georgia play winning football on the fly, mind you. Like they were thrown into the Gunnar Stockton was thrown into the fire against Texas in that SEC championship. Now he's got 3-4 weeks to prepare for that game. I imagine Georgia and Mike Bobo, they're going to find a way to, design an offense around Gunnar Stockton's legs. Like people kind of want to compare it to Stetson Bennett, I guess, just the player type and things like that. But like, don't get it twisted. Gunnar Stockton was a higher ranked recruit than Carson Beck coming out of high school. Your high school recruiting ranking isn't everything, like, but it is something. Like, there's a lot of people. This guy's like a top 100, top 150 player coming out of high school. Like, he is big time, and his legs are a legitimate weapon. And you saw when he ran for that first down early on in the game, like he got up in the defender's face. Like he's built a little bit different than Carson Beck, and that might not be a bad thing in terms of, how Georgia wants to play, the certain style of football. So you look at if Georgia brings the defense that they played against Texas both times or against the Clemson. That was one question I had for Brian, my Notre Dame guest that was on earlier, was kind of who on Notre Dame's schedule kind of can prepare them for the Georgia game. Like, and not even to rub it in like they haven't seen anything like Georgia, but just legitimately asking. Like, I don't really know if there's a team that you can really stack up and say that's a team that's going to attack Notre Dame the way Georgia is going to. I think Clemson is probably the most similar team that I see in terms of having they weren't a very good defense this year, but they were solid. I would say not as good as Notre Dame's defense, but in terms of Cade Klubnik, like an athletic quarterback, and a solid running game, like I think they're going to attack Georgia in a similar way. But I mean, that's also, we're sitting here on December 23rd. That's back on, what was that, August 30th? Like that's the first game of the entire football season. And can we expect that type of performance? Is Georgia even that type of team now here in week, whatever you want to call this? We were week 14 and now we're, I don't know. I've lost track of the weeks. I guess it would be like week 18. So that's got to be like what, 16, 17 weeks away, or in the past, I should say. So, but that's kind of what I see them. I think the Clemson game is similar, and I'm not saying that Georgia's going to go out and beat them 34-3. I'm just saying Georgia's gotten similar looks to a Notre Dame. I think you could compare a Georgia Tech team that, we saw what Georgia Tech did to this Georgia defense, just ran all over them. Haynes King looked like the best player in college football that night playing in Sanford Stadium. And Georgia's had, an unfortunate pattern of making a couple of guys look like Heisman Trophy winners, whether it's Jalen Milroe or Haynes King, probably Jackson Dart for that matter. Like, Georgia's given up some big time performances to quarterbacks this year. But I also, I personally think, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I personally think Haynes King is a better player than Riley Leonard. I think he's a more dynamic passer, and he's also kind of a power runner. Like, Riley Leonard is a very good runner, but I think he's a kind of a different type of runner than Haynes King is. But that's not to say that he couldn't have every bit of the success that Haynes King had against this Georgia defense. And you also have Jeremiah Love, 1,000-yard rusher. Like, you saw what he's capable of with his 98-yard run in that SMU game, or in the Indiana game for Notre Dame. So